Who let the cleaning staff walk into the ring? Camille Drake's voice sliced through the gym like a knife, loud enough to silence every punch, every breath. All heads turned. There she was, Zaria Monroe, barefoot in worn sneakers, holding a duffel bag patched with duct tape, standing like a statue in a room where every wall reeked of privilege. Camille smirked, eyes gleaming with contempt. She was the reigning world champion, undefeated, adored by millions for her ruthless talent and her even more ruthless tongue. Looks like someone took a wrong turn on her way to mop the floors, she added, giggling into her phone as her followers exploded with laughing emojis. But Zaria didn't flinch. She simply looked around the room, swallowed her pride, and whispered, "I thought this was the community scholarship program." Camille's laughter echoed like thunder. "Scholarship? Baby girl, we train fighters here, not charity cases." Zaria stood still, her eyes steady, even as humiliation burned through her skin. Then a gravelly voice cut in. Coach Frank Delaney, stepping out from his office with a clipboard. "The program exists and she's on the list." Camille scoffed. "Fine, let's test her. 3 rounds. With me." The room froze. This wasn't a test. It was a public execution dressed as sport. Camille leaned in, her tone mocking. "If you last, you stay. If not, well, the mop's over there." Zaria's heart pounded, not with fear, but fire. She nodded. "I accept." And in that moment, something shifted, not just in the gym, but in destiny itself. What could make a girl from the streets stand up to a world champion with millions watching? Would you take that punch to prove you belong? Comment below. The storm is only beginning. Zaria Monroe sat alone in the locker room, her hands resting on her knees, the borrowed gloves lying beside her. The muffled sounds of laughter and chatter filtered in from the gym, but her mind was somewhere far from Manhattan, back in Kingston, Jamaica, where everything she knew about survival had been forged in fire. "You don't have to do this," Coach Frank Delaney said gently, standing at the doorway, his brows furrowed with concern. "Camille plays dirty. You don't owe anyone a beating just to earn their approval." Zaria slowly looked up. Her eyes were calm, but underneath that calm was something ancient, something primal. "I won't get hurt," she said with certainty. "She has sponsors, fans, technique, trainers, and I have something she's never had." Frank tilted his head. "What's that?" "Hunger," Zaria whispered. "Not the metaphorical kind. I mean real hunger. The kind that makes your hands shake at night. The kind that forces you to learn how to throw a punch before you know how to read." There was a pause. And then she added, almost as an afterthought, "That's the first thing I ever learned, to fight for my next meal." Frank didn't respond at first. Instead, he sat beside her. "Where'd you learn?" She closed her eyes, the memories crashing in like waves. Her mother yelling through the cracked door of their tin roof home, telling her to stop before she got herself killed. The underground fights, the bruises that never had time to heal. The money exchanged in whispers. "Kingston," she said. "Back alleys, rusted gloves, men 3 times my size. I didn't fight for trophies. I fought so my little brother could eat." "Why'd you stop?" Frank asked. Zaria smiled faintly. "Because I promised myself that if I ever got out, I'd never need my fists again. I'd build a new life. I even took a job cleaning office buildings at night. I was trying to forget who I had to be." A heavy silence followed until a deep voice interrupted them. "Lightning." Zaria froze. Her blood ran cold. Only one person ever used that name. She turned slowly to see Uncle Lionel standing in the doorway, his face lined with time and truth. "Uncle," she whispered, "what are you doing here?" "I came to make sure you hadn't lost your damn mind," he said, his Jamaican accent thick, but his tone soft with love. "And to remind you, you're still lightning." Frank looked between them. "Lightning?" Uncle Lionel nodded. "The most feared street fighter Kingston ever produced. She made grown men beg for mercy before her 15th birthday. That girl," he said, pointing to Zaria, "is no amateur." Frank looked at her anew, something shifting in his expression. Zaria didn't flinch. She stood, picked up her gloves, and said softly, "Camille thinks she's walking into a show. She doesn't realize. She's walking into a storm." Outside the locker room, Camille Drake was putting on a show. She strutted in front of her phone, streaming to millions. "Y'all aren't ready for this," she laughed. "Some cleaning girl from the Bronx thinks she can step to a world champ? I'll teach her humility, one punch at a time." Her manager, Bradley Green, watched with a smirk, feeding her ego like fuel to fire. "Make it quick and clean, Camille. This'll get us another sponsor reel by morning." But on the other side of the gym, something far less theatrical and far more real was taking shape. Zaria stood alone in front of the mirror, wrapping her hands with the precision of someone who'd done it 1,000 times. Her movements were deliberate, almost meditative. Coach Frank Delaney stood quietly, just watching. Every move told a story, one not of an amateur, but of a seasoned fighter hiding in plain sight. The gym, once full of jeers and whispers, started to shift. Marcus Iron Hands Holloway, a retired middleweight now training rookies, leaned toward his protege and murmured, "Watch her footwork. It's too smooth, too quiet. That girl knows how to fight." "But she's just a cleaner, right?" the young boxer asked. Marcus shook his head. "Don't let appearances fool you. The quiet ones are always the ones to fear." Slowly the mood changed. The mocking turned into murmurings of curiosity. Some boxers who once laughed now leaned against the ropes, arms crossed, watching her every move. Camille didn't notice. She was too busy posting one last video, holding up Zaria's tattered shoes like trophies. "This girl's gonna learn real quick that this sport ain't about charity." Zaria emerged, walking silently past the ring. She wore nothing flashy, just plain black trunks, a white tank, and determination carved into every line of her body. As she approached, Uncle Lionel gave her a nod. "Remember who you are." She gave him a small smile. Lightning never forgot. Then she stepped into the ring. Camille winked at the camera and said, "Time to remind the world who's queen." But across the ring, Zaria wasn't thinking about cameras, likes, or followers. She was thinking about her brother's empty stomach, her mother's tired hands, and the promises she'd made to herself. The referee called them to the center. The gym fell silent, but in that silence, something unspoken was building. Respect, not from Camille, but from those who recognize that greatness doesn't always walk in wearing gold belts. Sometimes it arrives quietly, wrapped in scars, ready to roar. And as the bell drew near, every eye in the room began to wonder the same thing. Had they just mistaken a lion for a lamb? The bell rang, and the room inhaled as one. Camille lunged forward, cocky and confident, her fists cutting the air like daggers. But Zaria slipped each jab with an ease that defied belief. She wasn't fighting. She was dancing, floating on the balls of her feet, her movements so fluid it was like watching smoke avoid fire. Camille's punches connected with nothing but air, and with every miss, frustration carved deeper into her face. "Stay still!" she barked, throwing a wide cross that left her center exposed. That was all Zaria needed. In one motion, she pivoted, her left hook snapping across Camille's jaw with surgical precision, sending the champ stumbling backwards. The gym gasped. Zaria's face didn't change. No smile, no swagger. Just focus. Camille blinked, stunned, trying to recalibrate. But Zaria was already moving again. She weaved under a right, then countered with a body shot that made Camille grunt. The sound echoed raw and real. The crowd, once expectant of a public humiliation, now leaned in, breathless. This was no accident. Camille, for the first time in her life, looked afraid. She tried to use her height, pushing Zaria with her forearm, desperate to regain control. But Zaria was faster, sharper. She struck again, this time a jab to the chin that made Camille's eyes water. Another left, then a right. Every punch told a story, every dodge a chapter of a life where failure wasn't an option. "Who is this girl?" someone whispered ringside. Coach Frank didn't answer. He was watching Zaria with wide eyes, witnessing the resurrection of a legend he'd never known existed. Camille swung again, a wild, desperate haymaker, and missed. Zaria punished her with a 3-hit combo. Jab, uppercut, hook. Camille's legs buckled. Zaria stepped back, never rushing, never overreaching. She wasn't just winning, she was exposing everything false about the arrogance that filled this room. The bell ended the first round, but Camille was already staggering. Her lip bled, her confidence was shattered. The second round began with less noise. Camille charged with whatever was left in her pride, but Zaria welcomed her like a shadow welcomes light. Then came the moment. A clean slip, a countercross, and Camille's head snapped sideways. Zaria followed with a hook to the ribs, then an uppercut that lifted the champion off her feet for a split second before she crashed to the canvas in a heap. Gasps became roars. Phones shook in trembling hands. Camille blinked up at the lights, her mouth open in disbelief. She had never been here before. 10 seconds. That's all it took. 10 seconds for her world to crumble. The referee counted. 8, 9, 10. Knockout. Zaria stood over her, breathing steady, fists down, heart quiet. No gloating, just truth. She whispered, "You wanted to teach me a lesson. I hope you learned something too." And as the cameras flashed and Camille's empire began to crumble, Zaria didn't raise her hands in triumph, because storms don't celebrate. They just pass through and leave the world changed forever. The silence that followed was thunderous. Camille Drake, once untouchable, lay sprawled on the mat while the crowd stared as if they'd just witnessed history itself being rewritten. No one moved, no one breathed, until the referee raised Zaria Monroe's arm and declared the match. But Zaria didn't raise her fists or bask in the applause. She simply turned to the corner where Camille was being tended to and walked over, calm as sunrise after a storm. Camille looked up, face bruised, pride broken, tears forming in her eyes. Not from pain, but from disbelief. "You said I didn't belong here," Zaria said quietly, "but you were wrong. I didn't come to take anything from you. I came to claim what was already mine, respect." Camille opened her mouth, but no words came out. Her voice had always been her weapon. But now silence was all she had left. Around them, the crowd erupted. Phones recorded. Journalists scribbled. Trainers stared in awe. And in that chaos, a shift occurred. Zaria wasn't just a girl who beat a champion. She had become something else entirely. A symbol. Coach Frank approached, his voice trembling. "Zaria, what you did tonight. I've trained fighters for 30 years and I've never seen anything like that," Zaria offered a half smile. "You just saw what happens when someone's been underestimated their whole life." Uncle Lionel joined them, pride shining in his eyes. "You didn't just fight for you, girl. You fought for every person who was told they weren't enough." Across the ring, Bradley Green was frantically on the phone, already losing sponsors. Camille's Instagram feed, once filled with praise, now overflowed with mockery. Arrogance gets knocked out. Respect the real ones. Lightning Monroe ended her in 3 minutes. Camille scrolled through the comments with trembling fingers, watching her carefully curated image shatter like glass. Zaria, meanwhile, walked to the edge of the ring and looked out at the stunned crowd. Her voice rose, strong and even. "I didn't win because I'm stronger. I won because I never forgot where I came from. I don't fight for fame. I fight for every girl who's been laughed at, every janitor who's been ignored, every child told they'd never rise above their street. This ring doesn't care how expensive your shoes are. It only respects truth." That night, news stations across the country ran the same headline: "The cleaner who knocked out a champion." But for Zaria, it wasn't about going viral. She didn't want revenge. She wanted dignity. Camille was helped out of the ring by her trainer, her head lowered, her phone buzzing with notifications she no longer dared to read. Zaria watched her go, then whispered under her breath, "Sometimes the fall teaches more than the climb." And just like that, a janitor from the Bronx walked out of the ring not just as a winner, but as the living proof that character beats ego every time. 3 days after the knockout, Zaria Monroe sat in a modest cafe in Harlem, sipping lukewarm tea while her uncle scrolled through his phone, grinning. "It's everywhere, Zaria. ESPN, Sports Illustrated, even CNN, they're calling you the storm in sneakers." Zaria said nothing. She had never cared for attention, and yet the world wouldn't stop looking. Camille Drake, once a queen of the ring, had lost not just a fight, but the illusion of invincibility. Her sponsors had dropped her overnight. Her once beloved Instagram account now flooded with mocking memes and harsh truths. She tried to issue an apology video, but the internet has a long memory, And sincerity doesn't come easily to those who've spent years speaking in arrogance. Meanwhile, Zaria's inbox overflowed with offers, fighting contracts, media appearances, sponsorship deals. But it was the call from Golden Legacy Promotions that changed everything. Miss Monroe, we'd like to offer you a 3-fight contract worth $2 million, with a renewal clause if you continue this performance, the voice on the other end said. Zaria stared at the ceiling of her tiny apartment that night, her hands still sore from the fight, and whispered, "This is for Mom." Within a month, she had signed her first professional contract. Her story was no longer confined to the gym. It was global. Under Armour released a new campaign inspired by her. Earned, not given. Commercials showed her tying worn laces, wrapping her knuckles with old gauze, training alone in the early morning light. She became a face for resilience. But Zaria didn't let the fame twist her. She knew the price of ego. Instead of soaking in the glory, she turned her earnings towards something more lasting, Lightning Dreams, a foundation dedicated to giving young women from the underserved communities scholarships and safe training spaces. Her first gym opened in Kingston, Jamaica, right where she learned to fight, not to win, but to survive. At the ribbon cutting, she stood before a crowd of children and reporters, her voice firm and emotional. This place is not just a gym, it's a promise that no matter where you come from, your story matters, your struggle matters, and your strength is real. Coach Frank visited her soon after, awestruck. "You built something bigger than boxing," he said. She smiled, wiping sweat from her brow. Boxing was never the end. It was just the beginning. Back in Manhattan, the gym where it all began had transformed. The scholarship program, once overlooked, now had a waiting list 500 names long. Donations poured in, coaches volunteered. The aura had shifted from elite exclusivity to empowered inclusion. Young fighters from all backgrounds now walked through the same doors Zaria once did, not in fear, but in hope. Meanwhile, Camille tried to rebuild her image. She launched a YouTube channel, posted apology after apology, but the world wasn't ready to forget. You can't unring a bell, and lightning had struck. Zaria didn't gloat. When asked in interviews about Camille, she always responded the same way. "I'm not here to shame anyone. I'm here to shine. Let's teach young girls that they don't have to be loud to be powerful." And with each new match, each life touched by her foundation, the storm grew stronger. Not with destruction, but with purpose. Under the blinding lights of the championship arena, Zaria Monroe stood center ring once again, her breath steady, her gaze unshaken. The referee lifted her arm high. She had just unified the world title with another stunning second-round knockout. But this time, the crowd wasn't just cheering a victory. They were celebrating a revolution. Microphones were thrust toward her. Cameras captured her every blink. But when asked who she wanted to thank, she didn't mention her coaches, her sponsors, or even her family. Instead, she said, "I want to thank the people who tried to break me, who laughed at my shoes, questioned my presence, and tried to decide my worth based on my skin and my silence. Because you taught me that power isn't given, it's taken back one punch at a time." In a modest apartment across the country, Camille Drake sat on the edge of a worn couch, watching with heavy eyes. She saw something she'd never understood before. Not just talent, but greatness. It was forged not in wealth or followers, but in pain, patience, and an unwillingness to be silenced. Team Thorn. Her hand trembled as she clicked off the television, her own fall now complete. Back in the ring, Zaria turned to the roaring crowd and smiled. Not a smile of triumph, but of peace. Months earlier, she had been a nobody with a mop and a dream. Now she was a movement. The Lightning Dreams Foundation had reached over 300 girls, helping them find paths through sport, education, and hope. The girl once laughed out of the gym had become the reason thousands walked in with their heads held high. "This isn't about revenge," she told a journalist after the match. "This is about dignity. We don't fight to hurt, we fight to be heard." And as her words echoed across TV screens and hearts around the world, Zaria Monroe proved one truth unshakable. Storms don't just destroy, they cleanse. And sometimes being underestimated is the greatest gift of all. You reading this, have you ever been told you're not enough? Have you ever been judged by how little you had instead of how hard you fought? Maybe it's time you showed them your lightning too. Tell us in the comments, what's the one moment when you proved everyone wrong?